Here you go. First of all, I'd like to just point out what the context of this is. Pascal Lamy said in an answer to a question to me at this committee that the famous and much vaunted EU single market is 80% is only 40% complete in services. So that's the context. Now, I'm not particularly an evangelical Christian, but there's a very good saying in the Bible, which is to say, before you try and cast out the mote in your brother's eye, a small speck, you should be casting out the beam in your own eye. So that's the context in which this is taking place. Now, there's another context in which it's taking place. Earlier on, and pointed out earlier on, that the UK is the world's largest exporter of services, bigger even than the United States. However, because we're members of the European Union, in these very important discussions which are going on, we don't have our own seat. We have a seat subsumed into one of 28, represented, I assume, by the EU Trade Commissioner, who incidentally 3 political groups voted against. And by comparison, the country of Mauritius, which is a former, as it happens, a former British colony, they have their own seat. They can discuss services at the top table, and our voice is completely subsumed. And it is an irony, and I do put this, and I do put this to some of my colleagues from my own country, that it simply really doesn't make any sense at all. Now, there were 2 very quick comments which I do going to say at lightning speed. Emma McClarkin quite rightly pointed out her concern about Turkish construction workers coming into the EU under this heading. The concern is entirely valid and very well put by Ms McClarkin. But I must point out that her party, the British Conservative Party, which is in government, are the major cheerleaders for Turkey to become a full-fledged member of the European Union. And if that happens, there will be free movement of people. So basically, I would like to ask her, or another representative of the Conservative Party, does her concern about Turkish construction workers under services mean that the Conservative Party and the Conservative government has changed its position on Turkey becoming a full member of the European Union? I'm not trying this to make trouble. They would, they should, and they ought to. It's an entirely reckless policy. Now, Ms. Shaka also said, and I quote from what she said, one sentence only, she said, the EU is the most open economy in the world. Well, I have to say, she's not in her place. If you think that, you can think anything. Ms. Shaka has been a member, like I have, since 2009, and this stream of regulation has gone through the European Parliament, all of which has closed up the European economy, and almost all of which Ms. Shaka voted for. She must be suffering from amnesia. Now, finally, my final point is that in this rather cliché-ridden document, there's a serious attempt at the politicization of trade, and it uses as comment the European political, cultural and social model. So in 2 sentences, this is written by written by a Luxembourg MEP, who is, believe it or not, a former Luxembourg commissioner. So let's look at the political and cultural model of Luxembourg, which is based on the tax evasion, providing a home in which multinationals can evade their tax, and in which unqualified people get very senior jobs in the European Union. For example, there are 2,100 employees of the European Parliament sitting in Luxembourg. They should be transferred to my constituency in Plymouth, or other people's constituencies in Bucharest. They shouldn't be in the richest country. And I make one suggestion for Luxembourg, and one suggestion for my distinguished colleague, the ex-commissioner. She's very keen on Mr. Juncker's proposals. Well, I suggest that Luxembourg, as part of its quota, takes in 50,000 economic immigrants, and let's see how long their political, cultural and social model lasts. Basically, this report is a compendium of clichés and is a waste of time for this committee even to consider.